Hello and welcome to another Kepler workflow development video, and this is a more complicated example. And what's going on here is we're going to copy a file on a remote system to the local system based off the directories and file locations I specified. So this took quite a long while to figure out for several reasons. One of them I already mentioned, with you have to escape backslashes for file name, for directory paths to be basically read correctly. And there seems like there was also some other problems that you ran into with Kepler not understanding file paths correctly. I don't remember off the top of my head, but and the other thing has to do with this local. So, and I'll be explaining that shortly. So, the first thing is this is actually a file that exists on a remote system, and it's an output file, a very small one, but an output file. So in this first expression, so with the SSH file copier, it needs to know basically my username and the server for the remote location, and a colon with the absolute path to the file. So, and this is a standard Linux SSH way of specifying a path. As some people might be aware, you can put localhost and a colon and then the path if the file does exist on your local machine. And then that's why this local is very confusing, because when I first started trying to do this, the SSH file copier needs to get local, either from the source or the target, one or the other. Well, actually, let me rephrase that. That's not necessarily true. It should be able to copy a remote file to a different remote system. But if the file is on the local machine, you need to use the keyword local. I tried using the keyword localhost because that's what I'm used to, and it did not know how to interpret that. It gave an error basically. So, but the really confusing part is you might notice this R work directory is documents, WSU classes, so on and so forth. And for those of you familiar with Windows, there's actually a lot before this, such as C:/ users, then / my username, and then / documents, so on and so forth. So the really confusing part is basically this local represents your home directory on the local machine. It does not recommend or represent the local host, which is quite a bit different. So they picked a very poor naming convention when naming this. But once I figured out that's what this was doing, it's basically I had the absolute path all the way, C drive all the way down, and I eventually figured out that this local was appending the home directory, so another C:/ user / my username. So basically I was creating a file path that didn't exist, hence the reason I was getting an error all the time. And these string replacements actually don't do anything. They're kind of left over from when I was doing testing, but it is a nice actor in that you can give it a pattern and then it'll replace it with a value. And here I was removing the C:/ because that was incorrect. Or I thought that was what was causing errors at the time. And yeah, this one doesn't do anything at all. But well, neither of them do anything because there's no C:/ in the path anymore. But yes, I'll go ahead and run this. And I've already ran this once, so oh wow, it finished really quickly. So basically, you can check. This is how I typically do debugging, is along the workflow you can actually name outputs as different things, and you can actually check. So this is the final input that made it into the SSH file copier. So if we heavily modified the string, we could check and see what we did, that we actually did modify it correctly, and that the end result is valid. But we also get true, which this is the success port, so it was successful in copying the file. And then the first end window is blank, so there were no errors. If there were errors, they would be displayed here, basically. So, but yes, this is how you copy files using SSH within Kepler.